Hello and welcome to the Rippling Pages podcast. This is the podcast where we have a coffee with the world's most interesting writers and where you can rely on writers to get real about writing. It's all crafted and created by me, Liam Bishop. Delighted to have you here. Now, what happens when a man rekindles his passion for a sport he once loved? What happens as he increasingly neglects his loved ones in pursuit of local club glory? These are the questions at the heart of Ashton Politanoff's novel, Dad Had a Bad Day, published by Daunt Books. What I loved about Ashton's novel, however, is its articulate exploration of masculinity, its patiently crafted unraveling narrative, and its loyal homage to the sport of tennis. Ashton Politanoff is a frequent contributor to Noon, which is edited by Diane Williams. He's a former Division 1 tennis player. And his childhood coach was Robert Lansdorp. It sounds a bit like in the UK we had something called "This Is Your Life," where you bring kind of old associations back as end of a career. You bring all these kind of old dignitaries back and sort of celebrate. It sounds like you're free. But that's true. I pulled this biography offline. Is that true? You were coached by Robert Lansdorp, who was Pete Sampras and Sharapova.
Yeah, roughly from ages 8 to 13.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, there we go. So Ashton is a former Division 1 tennis player. His childhood coach was Robert Lansdorp, who's credited with coaching Pete Sampras and Maria Sharapova. They are my era. They're tennis players that I remember growing up. And his first novel, You'll Like It Here, was published in 2022 by Dalkey Archive Press. He's an English professor at Cypress College. Ashton, I'm delighted to welcome you to the Rippling Pages.
Well, Liam, thanks so much for having me. And just an honor to be here, and thanks for that really nice introduction.
Well, you're welcome. And I mean, this was back when we didn't really have cable TV, and we watched sports, and so you'd watch over here, you'd watch soccer in the summer, football in the winter, and then it become summer, and you get your test cricket, which is not a huge American sport, I appreciate, but that come onto the television, and then it'd roll around to midsummer, and you get Wimbledon, and then that's where you would associate with, you would sit and watch it because it was live available sport. So Sampras, Tim Henman, those are the kind of tennis players I remember.
Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite moments watching tennis when I was younger was watching Wimbledon and Goran Ivanisevic as well, Patrick Rafter.
Yes. Pat Rafter with his headband.
Yes, he is one of my all-time favorites. And Tim Henman too. It's just such a clean, beautiful game, and I really miss watching that net play, the serve and volleyer. You just don't see that as much anymore, or hardly at all.
Well, it is a tennis novel, so we're not just talking tennis, because it is a tennis novel. And I mean, I've only got an advanced copy here, but it has the green, which is what we associate with lawn tennis, which is what we associate with Wimbledon. But obviously, it is a novel about tennis, and I genuinely can't wait to get into this because it's such a fantastic story amongst sort of all the thematic elements to it. But before we get going, just to remind you, my listeners, we're obviously delighted to have you here, but don't forget, leave a 5-star review if you enjoy this or any other episode of the Rippling Pages. It really helps. It really, really does. You can also leave comments. You can leave me a little comment about what tennis player you liked, what sport you like, or maybe what you enjoy about the show. But it's a really nice way for you to get in touch with me as well. But shall we get into it, Ashton?
Let's do it.
I'm glad you didn't say no, because that'd have been terrifically awkward. But let's get into it, Ashton. Let's start by asking who is Ned, and maybe why tennis for Ned.
So Ned is a father, a husband, and a former childhood competitive tennis player, former college tennis player. And Ned loses his job. And he's trying to find his purpose again. And he finds his passion for the game again after watching a young hopeful playing at the local park. And that strikes some sort of innocent playfulness that resides within him still. What probably initially drew him to the game as a child. So he starts playing again, and he does that by rejoining the local tennis club that he grew up playing at. Obviously, he's out of work at this point, and he's got to 6-year-old son, Freddie, and he's tasked with being a stay-at-home father as his wife makes money for the family. So he takes out a secret credit card, and that's what he charges his club account to. And in that process of joining the local tennis club, he reconnects with an old childhood friend, another former tennis prodigy, but it quickly leads to a descent into obsession and addiction.
We'll get it. Let's get into some of that. And it's interesting that you said it all. Ned's obviously got some things going on in his life, but what I really quite like is, and it, indicated to some extent by the cover, is it's a novel that is set largely within the tennis club. I don't know if you could tell us about the choices of choosing this as the environment for this novel, and some of the details of how you make it such a captivating setting for this novel.
Yeah, so I, like Ned, this is not an auto-fictional tale, but like Ned, I grew up playing tennis. As the bio states, my early childhood coach was Robert Lansdorp. And so, like Ned, I stopped playing for some time and came back to it in my mid-30s. I missed the game, and I decided to pick up my racket again and convince my wife, hey, let's upgrade our gym membership to also include tennis. And and so I started playing again, and I really loved it. I really loved playing again. I then got involved as a player in some amateur leagues in the area. And then played the match and played pretty well, but we ultimately lost. And I remember feeling just really down about it. And it really affected me. And I was like, where is this coming from? I thought, hey, this amateur league and a club setting could be the perfect framework for me to explore some of the themes that I'm interested in. Male friendship, fatherhood, second chances, midlife crisis.
Did you feel like you had to write it in some way then? Not in a nicky way, but in a there was feelings there that you had to explore and write about that were provoked by tennis.
Absolutely. And also, when I kind of lock in on an idea for something and the idea keeps popping up in my head, it's hard for me to turn away from that.
That's a sportsman. That's a sportsman.
And yeah. And so that's what happened with this idea. I just kept thinking about it. And that's sort of my process in general, where I just think about things for a while before I actually put pen to page. And I had a couple false starts with this, where I wrote 10 pages over my winter break from teaching and discarded them. And then 3-4 months later, during my spring break for a week of teaching, a week off of teaching, I wrote some more pages, and something was off about it. There was an inauthenticity there, and I just couldn't get behind the voice. And it wasn't until that summer, 2023, where I did a couple things. I wrote an outline based off screenwriting books that I assigned to my students. And I didn't refer to the outline at all while I was writing the book, but it helped me get out of the woods. And then the other important thing, the most important thing, was landing on the voice of this sort of resentful, grumpy father taking his sick son to the park because there's this feeling of claustrophobia being stuck at home with him as a stay-at-home father, a newly stay-at-home father. Those elements came together organically after some trial and error, and was off to the races. And then it just really flowed from there. I wrote a draft of the novel, a very early draft, by the end of that summer. And I was writing every day for a couple hours, often at my local tennis club's bar. During closing hours. So in the early morning, I'd drop off my sons at their summer care, and then I'd go to the club and work off of my laptop, and had a nice vantage point and some quiet there.
Yeah, it's quite. I guess it's quite quiet sport, isn't it, tennis, to some extent? But it is, Ned's voice is very intimate to Ned's experience. And we're inside his mind as he compares himself to Roger Federer, and then his choices around what he does, ultimately very selfish choices about using the credit card and lying about not getting jobs and that kind of thing. But I wondered then if we can talk a bit about his relationship with his son. Because if you mentioned the idea of him being a stay-at-home father, I find it very interesting how we start with the novel and how we start with Ned and his son. I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit why you chose for him to have a son at that age and why that was important for this novel.
Well, I think we're inspired by what's around us, and as I mentioned, I'm a father, a parent, a husband. I have two sons, and both of us work, and both of us have been in situations where we are stay at home for various periods of time, and that can be really amazing and full of precious moments, but it also can be a lot when you're trying to wear multiple hats. Some of the material, it's fiction, but it came from a place of experience.
One of the first images that we have of his son, and that we see throughout the novel, is this image of crying. He hears he's when he's at the tennis club and he's watching them play tennis, and you can start to see him rekindling this love. But I wondered if how they communicate, how Ned and his son communicate. Does his son, of all the different characters in the novel, does his son have a weight through to him that other characters don't?
I think so. I think the son is seeing the deterioration of his father, and that's obviously a heartbreaking element, and tough to write about. He's a very smart, perceptive boy, and that was important to me to make him that way. And you see him in moments kind of being more of the parent in some ways with Ned. The roles switch during some times in the novel, and I thought that was really interesting territory to explore as well. There's a tenderness between them that I think Ned hasn't been able to find in his life with his own upbringing, for one, and even in male friendships. So I thought that was, I thought there were some opportunities there to really showcase that. In one scene, we have the father resting on the couch after drinking, and the son sort of rubs his father's head. Moments like that are pretty charged and disturbing too.
It is, and it's this does happen though. This is a phenomenon in families where fathers that are who might have certain needs, the children can step up and provide that to some extent, and roles can reverse. And I think there's a point, isn't there, where I think Ned's just lost a game, hasn't he?
Yes.
And he the way that him and his wife communicate is infrequent, and we see the letters or missives that he sends to her, and he lies, doesn't he, at one point, saying that I had to console my son because he was really upset I lost, but actually ultimately it was the other way around.
And you see that as we grow and roles do a switch with our elderly parents and such. But tragically, this happens in the book at a much younger, nascent stage that obviously is unacceptable and not okay. But yeah, I think Ned and Freddie, their relationship epitomizes that. But Freddie's often there to emotionally support his father.
I mean, you said it's tragic. Is it? Do you think it is tragic?
I think so. I mean, I had a very lighthearted ending initially that I quickly threw out the window when I was drafting it, and it went into much darker territory. And I think ultimately it is really tragic. I mean, I think, once the book is out in the world and in readers' hands, it can be interpreted in all sorts of different ways and take on different meaning, and I welcome that.
Yeah, and I think this is a thing of what we're hinting toward here. It will strike. I played sport growing up. My dad wanted me to do well. My dad loved sport. I was surrounded by other young boys playing sport and other fathers and mothers and family members. And it's a real insight into relationships. Standing on a soccer football pitch and, watching round and seeing the fathers shouting at, seeing which fathers shout at their sons, which gratefully my father was never like that. But watching which fathers shout at their sons and watching the sons get upset at that, and it's kind of an arena for watching fathers' hopes and dreams trying to be relived and lived out by their sons, and it's the frustrations have been enacted into their sons, and it's really sad. I think when you look back, it's really sad, and it's a shame that
I see that now. Even like with my sons playing baseball, I can sense when a kid is really nervous. And because their father is quick on them in terms of what you didn't do, and or the father's one of the coaches, and that can be hard to watch. And seeing the look of reassurance, or the seeking reassurance, the son seeking reassurance from his father in the stands or in the dugout. And maybe I'm more sensitive to that, being someone who played a competitive sport growing up and being in that environment. That was my life, in terms of weekends, every day of the week, and seeing what some of my friends went through as well.
Wow. Yes, you were. I mean, you were a really good tennis player.
Well, I underperformed a little bit in terms of I would get quite nervous in tournaments.
Right.
In college, I did much better. I played Division I tennis, and I had results that were the converse of maybe how I performed a couple years prior in junior tennis, which was a nice note to sort of end my competitive career on, finding that. And then now, obviously, I'm back in the game as an adult, and other than that kind of detour through shame after my first loss, I think I have a healthy relationship with the game. I play with my wife, who's just learning how to play, and my sons play a little bit, and I've kind of gone the opposite way as a parent, maybe too passive. I don't say anything. My question is like, are you having fun? Daddy, can I skip practice today? Yeah, sure, no problem. My wife's like, no, they shouldn't be skipping, so.
Well, it's nice. It's nice to hear your relationship that you have with something that you ultimately. Well, and I know this. I've experienced this. I played sport as a kid, and I was fairly decent player, and it's really difficult when you feel like you want to do well at something, but at least these experiences certainly have formed a novel, and a good novel. It's certainly not underperformed in that respect, is it? But either way, the relationships that Ned has with other father figures. There's a few different father figures, isn't there? There's a lot of different paternal and fraternal relationships, isn't there? It's fair to say.
Yeah, it's all over. Even the first scene, there's Ned clearly sees a bit of himself in the young towhead hitting with the man who's presumably the young towhead's father, and automatically there's sort of a disdain for the father on the other side of the court. And even just the circumstances of the net sagging, it's a public court. This player is quite good. Why is he even hitting there? Is this even really happening? I intended it for it to be not surreal, but it is really happening. But obviously that there's what can be perceived as surreal touches throughout the novel that, in fact, I consider not surreal, but just a state of the state of Ned's mind.
Well, why don't we? I tell you what, we might do, Ashton. Actually, we might have a quick break on the ripping pages. We'll get this in, and then we'll start to map some of these out. I think because there's different relationships and there's different ways it informs his activities in the novel. But yeah, what I'll do is we'll do a quick break on the ripping pages, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about Ashton's novel Dad Had a Bad Day. Did you know that there's a Rippling Pages Patreon? For a small monthly fee, you can get exclusive member benefits, including Rippling Pages merchandise, specially curated craft insights of previous guests, as well as exclusive reveals of upcoming guests on the Rippling Pages before anyone else. You also get a shout out on the show. Me and the writer, me and whoever my guest is that month, will give you a nice shout out and a thanks for being a patron. So if you fancy it, there's a link in the show notes. Why not go have a look and see if you fancy being a member of the Rippling Pages Patreon. Hello and welcome back to the Rippling Pages. Let's talk more about these relationships with. Well, let's talk about the relationship that Ned has with his father and his stepfather, because they are quite different. And this is what you're so good at. This is what you're really, as many other things, what you're really good at is, because you jump between the present and then you get really small glimpses of his previous life. Just enough for us to go, oh, did this inform who he is now? Has this informed his choices now? But it's the scenes that you choose to write, and they are nuanced and so leaked in a very gentle way for a novel that's not always that subtle. I don't know if you could tell us a little bit about those choices, how you crafted some of those scenes.
I've been working with shorter text for quite some time. My book, You'll Like It Here, is very much composed of short text. I've been writing stories for Noon for many years, edited by the incredible Diane Williams. And not that every story that she publishes is short, but a lot of them happen to be on the shorter side. And I think some of that has to do with this extreme concentration on language. And so that's really important to me. And I think I was wrestling with that when I approached this novel, in terms of I want to write a longer narrative. I guess maybe more of a traditional story, but I don't want to write it in a traditional way, and trying to reckon with that. And I think that was also one of the impediments of getting started, until I decided I'm just going to embrace that aesthetic, and it can be a whole novel composed of shorter passages where I do care for language and I string it together in some way. Obviously, there are some longer passages, and a lot of that came through when my editor, Emily Bell, acquired it at Daunt, or not at Daunt, but Astra House, and we worked on the text significantly, and I added a lot of flashbacks then, and I added a lot of tennis. Again, I just wrote quickly but slowly. The last third of the book I wrote, or the last quarter of the book, I would say, I wrote very fast, in about a week. As I mentioned, I threw out the original ending or idea that I hadn't written yet, but I hadn't mapped out, and I came upon this much darker ending, and the book just spoke to me in that way, and I just trusted my instincts with that. And I felt really disturbed when I was working on that last quarter. It came out of me in like a fever dream. I was working on it, 4 hours a day, and it felt like I was racing towards something. But that was also really exciting when I hit that sort of stride. I like to think that I craft things really carefully. I'm really intentional about the language. I read my work aloud. I sit with it. And there's plenty of things that we cut out as well. Sort of half-baked stories, sort of analogous to the gut stringer. In the beginning, I had kind of these shorter stories around the lore of the club that were titillating and fun and dark, but they didn't really contribute to the overall storyline. And then there were additional scenes that we cut that were part of the storyline, and some scenes went on a bit too long, and I cut those down. So, yeah.
Some great insights into the craft of the book, but certainly a case of what you've left out has certainly elevated what's left in, for sure, by the sounds of it. But also the tightness of the prose is tight, and it has a pace to it, but it's the kind of clarity that it has that perhaps makes those scenes in the past a lot sharper. The fragments of Ned's memory. I mean, some of those have really stayed with me, when some of them with his coach, which is seems to be a little bit of a driving force for some of Ned's actions in the present day.
Although they were not happy scenes to write about, the flashbacks at the childhood academy, the collegiate scene, there was pleasure in crafting those in terms of creating this overall mood and deepening this character and giving us greater insight into why he's taking the actions that he is. So I really enjoyed that from the craft perspective, sort of planting those seeds. And
in terms of just thinking about the idea of writing and how you wrote it, you mentioned your first novel, and they are very different in terms of the subject matter, and the first novel doesn't really have any narrative, based on these ideas of clippings in a local newspaper archive, essentially, which is based in your hometown. But is it fair to say then that gave you ideas about how to condense what you are trying to tell the reader, and how you leave things to the reader to fill in the gaps, so to speak?
Absolutely. The use of white space, for one, concentrating on language, but having that first foray into writing a novel, even though experimental, gave me a sense of, or reinforced the sense of what structure is and how it can be played with or playing against structure. Not just language, but also this idea of tension. That was super important to me. That is really important to me. I don't want to write something that is flat. I don't want to take too much time to build. I want it to feel immediate. Maybe that has something to do not only with aesthetic concerns, things that I like to watch in terms of film and TV, but also, we're easily distracted, and I'm easily distracted. So I really need to feel the impact while I'm working on it. It needs to feel exciting for me. And I use that as my compass. Am I enjoying this while writing it? Is it exciting me in some way? And enjoying, that can be interpreted broadly. Doesn't mean I have to be in this like happy place when I'm working on it, but is it striking something within me? Creating different avenues of tension, I think, is really what helped me as a writer complete this project. So whether that is this sort of unhinged character, the secrets that he's keeping, or how he's the roles are being reversed with father and son, or the building tension, with the teammates and at the club, or the missing player, but also the letters that he's writing to his wife that she never receives. There's tension in that. They're not communicating. There's also a textual break with those letters, and I like that there's some variety in the text. That's, again, even though you'll like it, here's a very different book. There's news clippings, but there's also these diary-like entries that pepper the book as well. And so I'm always looking for ways of mixing things up. And
wow, that's so interesting. It's really opened it up for me, actually, in terms of thinking about this novel. I love tension. That's the word. I know it sounds it's a word that is it's a narrative. Narrative needs tension. It keeps us going. But the actual the intensity of Ned, the intensity of the relationships he's trying to manage, the intensity of the matches, the intensity of his regime, and the intensity of the emotions that he's clearly feeling between the different relationships. Thinking about his son, and you mentioned his wife, and this isn't then an achievement of the novel, isn't it? Because we have to feel sorry for his wife. We really do. I have to feel really sad for what happens to their relationship during the novel, but we only see her in intermittent moments.
Yeah, I think he is someone that's suffering from a loss of identity after losing his job, and coming from a generation where men were usually the sole breadwinners. I think he feels a real sense of shame with that. Even if economically that's not even possible in the times. It's a sort of this self-imposed pressure. And I think the letters reflect some of his deeper insecurities. And only a few times does it appear in the text outright, but there's like this libidinal tension where with his wife, with Carlin, the woman at the club. And I thought that was, again, another way to drive tension in the book. Playing with that was important to me in the process of writing.
The league coordinator, these Kafkaesque officials that dictate sort of rules on Ned. But yeah, what is Ned trying to do then with those letters that he sends his wife? Does Ned care about his relationship with his wife?
I think he does. I think he does really care. He cares a lot, but he's not able to communicate and share his feelings with her. And the letters are a way of sharing feelings, but he's not really sharing it with her. He's just writing them down. And it's sort of these unfiltered, initially petty thoughts filled with insecurity. But I think it also sort of maps his interiority as a character. I don't like writing interiority or interior thoughts. It's not that I don't like it as a reader, but when I try to do it, it doesn't feel right. I don't gravitate towards it aesthetically. And so that was my way of sort of mapping indirectly for the reader what might be going on in his mind other than the actions that he's taking in the book.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. And now you mentioned it, there isn't a lot of interiority, but he's so... it feels like this could be a bit of a way in, but he is so hung up on incredibly trivial... Well, not trivial to Ned, are they? He's so hung up on... insecurities. It seems like insecurities is insecurity a driving force for Ned and some of his actions?
Absolutely.
We've spoken about the trauma and the tragedy of his early relationship, but the insecurity that he feels is...
I think that's a great way of framing the book. It's very much driven by his insecurities, trying to reclaim his, so-called manhood or glory through this league and this club and all this posturing that's happening. And not that he's the only one with that sort of behavior. There's other players in the book too that exhibit that, but obviously not to the degree that Ned ultimately does. Even so, with Maddock, the other captain, who initially seems to be quite the antagonist in the book, really throwing a wrench into the league, Ned's plans as captain, his recruiting efforts and such.
Yeah, I love that whole set piece. Actually, I thought it was a brilliant choice. And
Thank
the
you.
way it just pulls I don't know if in terms of the podcast, I don't know how much I'll reveal about that, because I think it's a really interesting and crucial moment, isn't it, for the. And do you think, in terms of the actions then of Maddox and perhaps some of the other characters, I think of people like, Ken, who's the club steward, who there are some good role models in there as well, aren't there? As much as there are.
Yes.
And Ken's not perfect, and Maddox not either, to be fair. But there are lessons in here about conduct, I guess.
Ken, the manager of the club, who kind of reminded me a little bit of the hotel manager in White Lotus season 1. But just playing with somebody who's sort of in this position where they're kind of running things, but there's people above them as well, and also speaking to class in terms of like the members who maybe have some pull at the club and use that sway over Ken versus Ned, who doesn't have much sway, even though he's in this purported position of power as captain. So I thought that was a really fun dynamic to play with, that power struggle that starts to blossom in the book. And then Maddox, although rooting against him initially, as perhaps a reader, and clearly he wants to win the league as well. He shows a level of more level-headedness towards the end of the season, but without revealing things. I mean, he's playing within the rules.
Like any good sportsman, for pushing the boundary. But it is about boundaries. The whole novel is about boundaries, and tennis is about boundaries. As tennis sport is really, but it's about boundaries. And what's interesting in relation to that, the boundaries that he has with his wife. And you talked about the kind of you talked about the word he uses, libidinal, to be fair, but he is unable to get anywhere near his wife, but he's very comfortable crossing these boundaries in terms of Roland and the overextension of his duty, I guess, to some of his players, and how he takes on that captaincy role.
I found a lot of humor in that as well, like these men fighting over amateur tennis, and so much of their identity rides on this. I found quite absurd and funny.
You sound so you sound a little bit like kind of disparaging of Ned in terms of, you're like, why? Here we go again, Ned.
And not to disparage like those who love to play these.
I've been there, Ashton. I've been there. Don't worry about it. Even now,
but even
fantasy baseball leagues. I hate losing, so don't worry about that.
No, I'm the same way too. One of my first league matches, there's an altercation between my side of the court was doubles and the other side of the court. It was the most contentious match I've played, even compared to college matches. It was wild, and I was like, "This is just wild."
It is a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon, but it's
right.
You don't have to go very far. You don't have to go very far to observe. So if you're out there is potentially a healthy side to some of this competition.
Totally.
And then there is an unhealthy side. I mean, it's unhealthy. It seems unhealthy, but is unhealthy the right word?
I think definitely unhealthy, inappropriate. Illegal.
Crikey.
But I think it's also like interesting too that this. I was interested in sort of like these fast male friendships that formed and fell apart through the league and the culture around the league, which a lot of it revolves around drinking alcohol and such, and that's something that I was exploring a bit as well.
I spoke to Ben Markovitz last year, and he's a former basketball player, and we spoke about something like, he's we spoke about Updike and this idea of when you get reminders of those things in your past that make you feel, don't they? They make you feel how you used to feel to some extent,
right?
When you were good and you're athletic and you're in control of events and you're admired by people. but it's a journey to give that up, isn't it? To some extent. Well, Ashton, it's been brilliant getting some insights into this novel. Where, I mean, there's some beauty of tennis in there. There's obviously the aesthetic. You talked about the aesthetic appeal earlier. There's of your writing, but there's the aesthetic appeal of tennis. And you really do bring some of that to, like, the details about tennis, the tennis rackets, the players. Just the image of the grass courts is, the lush grass, and it is a very aesthetic sport. And you spoke about players like Roger Federer, which reminds me of that great essay by David Foster Wallace who wrote about that.
It's interesting you mentioned Wallace. I'm very underread when it comes to tennis writing, and I think I've avoided it.
Fair enough.
Because I feel close to it, too close to the sport in some ways, and also I've detected a falseness in a lot of TV and film portrayals of tennis, even with popular movies. Something about it, I think it's just hard. And I've talked to other tennis friends who played high-level tennis. They had that same challenge when watching those films. It's like accepting the world that it's trying to portray. And I think I was really hypercritical and hard on myself, and I avoided writing a lot of the tennis scenes, as mentioned, in the initial draft because of that quality of, like, can I even do it justice? Yeah. And do I need to dumb it down and this and that? And then I was like, no, you just write it the way you want to write it, and embracing that notion of the language of the expert. Michael Ondaatje talks about that, and I love his work so much. And even what he's done formally in terms of structure with his early works, like the collected works of Billy the Kid and Coming Through Slaughter, and even moments in The English Patient, which I know is more of a traditional novel. His work is really powerful for me, and aesthetically as well. So yeah, just embracing that, and just coming to the page as I am in terms of my knowledge of tennis, and just letting that be there. I remember at my launch yesterday, somebody asked, like, what do I need to know about tennis before I start reading the book? I don't play tennis. I don't know anything about tennis. And I said, well, my goal is that you, even if you might feel some distance from the language and description, my goal is by the end of the book that you're going to have a sense of the sport. And, themes that come from that in terms of the individual sport of tennis, the psychic pressures and of the game, the psychological pressure of the game. And
yeah, well, I love that because it is about, obviously, something you enjoyed, you loved, you got a lot of joy from it, you got a lot of, you have a relationship with the sport, and it is about a complicated character going through some complicated things, but there is an aesthetic beauty, an aesthetic appeal. And I'm certainly not a tennis expert, but I really enjoyed reading about the setting for this novel. There's so much in here about, if you are a writer, whether you like tennis or don't like sports, about using that idea of a constrained setting, a constrained environment to depict an environment with certain rules about conduct, and also the narrative of depicting someone in situations where they're in a competitive match in a literary, artistic way. So there is loads in here that is beyond tennis, but for whatever it is, I loved it for its tennis, and I've really enjoyed hearing more about Dad Had a Bad Day, Ashton. I mean, is there any more tennis novels, do you think?
Well, first of all, thanks for your words. It means a lot, Liam, and your close reading of the book. Any more tennis novels than me?
Yeah. Is there another set? Sorry, I think that's the first analogy. I think that's the first sporting metaphor, sporting analogy we've used. Forgive me.
No, I like it. It's great. I sort of have my eyes set on a surf novel next. That's my other hobby, is surfing.
Wow.
And so that's what I've been researching and sort of gearing up to work on next. And so I don't know what the future holds creatively in terms of other projects. I don't think I would like to write another tennis book, but who knows? So
it's out now, and it's published by Daunt Books. But for now, Ashton, it's been my pleasure to have you on the Rippling Pages.
Liam, thanks so much for your time and your great questions. It's been great talking to you.